Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Let me say thank you all for coming. This event has grown beyond expectations. It's worth talking perhaps just about the origins of it before I turn it over to Dr. Mahan from the OSD Historian's Office, who has been a great help in organizing this particular part of the seminar. So, a few months ago, I'm Brad Carson, the Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. I had an ambition, which is I felt guilty having worked at the Department of Defense now for 3 years, and having absorbed lots of Clausewitz, either in various aphorisms and maxims being presented in PowerPoint presentations in the Army where I was working, or I myself over the course of my own academic career and then working in defense, came across Clausewitz, had read parts of books 1 and books 8, but had never read the entire book, and wasn't sure kind of what to make of that. I felt it was a gap in my own education. And so I thought that I would get together, perhaps a coffee klatch, at most a book club, and try to read the entire book. And I thought it might be fun if we had some junior officers who would join us, some senior enlisted personnel who might be interested in reading it as well. So we sent out an invitation to the Joint Staff, to the services, and not surprisingly, we had a number of people who were interested in joining this very informal book club. Then we had the idea that perhaps we could use the convening power of the Pentagon to bring in some people who can help us understand the book a bit better, because as we all know, the meaning doesn't always announce itself on war. And so we thought perhaps we could have some guided reading. And that has grown into this, where we have perhaps the world's leading Clausewitz scholars really here today. And Dr. Mahan will introduce them all. But it's grown so beyond my expectation and has been more successful than I could have dreamed of. But I still hope today we have the informality of my original intent, which is that it should be very low-key, we should have frank discussion, an interesting discussion. There are no real rules, so just a chance to talk about an important thinker who still has relevance to our time as well. If I could, I know Dr. Mahan's going to give more formal introductions. Let me say a word about Dr. Perret here, because there was a story you told me yesterday, which I think resonates with me a lot. We were talking about your childhood, which was in Central Europe, in Berlin, and Vienna, and how his mother was analyzed by no one less than Sigmund Freud in Vienna. And he can remember as a young boy, he said, sitting outside of the waiting room as his mother was presumably laying on the couch being talked to by Dr. Freud. And this, of course, is like one of the great pinnacles of Western civilization, pre-war German culture, of which Clausewitz was a part. And Sigmund Freud, born in 1856, was really only one generation removed from Clausewitz and Readiness, and 2 from Scharnhorst. So a direct link, not too far away. But of course, all the books that Dr. Perret has written, including the seminal translation that brought Clausewitz to greater fame in the English language world. And we can talk about all of those books, but there is something else perhaps that is less known about you that you can attribute some authorship to as well. He said that Sigmund Freud would walk out of the appointment with his mother and would find the young Peter Perret waiting for him in the lobby. And he had a stepfather at this time, and Sigmund Freud would ask him how his relationship with the stepfather was. And he said, well, not so good. I often think about throwing him down the stairs. So the Oedipus complex, of course, important to Freud's thought, and perhaps among other works, Peter Perret can claim some authorship to that. So it's really nice to have you here as well. And the other scholars as well, thank you for your participation in this. Dr. Mahan, let me turn it over to you for more formal introductions, and then we'll begin what is hopefully a great but still very informal program as well. So Dr. Mahan.
Just so everyone can hear me, I guess. Assume my professorial roots and stand behind the podium. Good morning and welcome. As I look out at an audience filled with some Army and Navy officers, given the big game tomorrow, I find it fitting to open today's session with "Go Navy, beat Army." Now, as I look at some scowls back, I realize perhaps I should have reversed it. But as Mr. Carson said, I am Aaron Mahan, related to the great Admiral Mahan. And I'm not the chief historian of the Navy, but I am the chief historian of the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And we're not here today to discuss either the revered institution of the big game or Admiral Mahan, but yet another revered military strategist, Karl von Clausewitz. And I'm both humbled and honored that Acting Undersecretary Carson asked me to co-host and introduce this capstone event in his semester-long series devoted to seminars led by each of our panelists here today that centered on Clausewitz's On War. That strategist continues to hold a prominent place, as one scholar has aptly put it, amongst that small pantheon of classic military theorists and strategists. He has also entered our popular culture and is constantly referenced, as Mr. Carson said, in movies and novels and PowerPoint presentations, and often reduced, unfortunately, to mere aphorisms and maxims. But we will not hear that today. Instead, we will have much more in-depth conversations and discussions. So, in the essence of preserving time, let me keep my introductions brief. Full bios are in your program for each of our panelists and for our moderator. So let me start with, in the center, our host and moderator is Brad Carson. He's been the Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness since April 2015. Like all of our accomplished panelists, he has a long and distinguished career, so I please encourage you to read his fuller bio in the program. And starting immediately here at this end of the table is Dr. Christopher Basford, Professor of Strategy at the National Defense University's College of International Security Affairs. And one other, if you want to tell the group your other affiliation.
I'm in sort of a galactic outpost of NDU right now, down at Fort Bragg, the Joint Special Operations Master of Arts program, and for SOCOM, something we're doing for SOCOM, and it's a lot of fun.
And immediately to his right is Dr. Antulio Echeverria, Chair of Military Studies at the U.S. Army War College and editor of the U.S. Army War College Quarterly Parameters. Then we have the order changed from your program, but then we have Dr. Alan Byershan, sorry, Emeritus Associate Professor from The Ohio State University. A much fuller bio, of course, is in the program. I know I'm not doing justice to their careers. Mr. Carson is in the center, and then we have Dr. John Sunito, Professor of History at the University of Maryland at College Park. To his left, I'm sorry, I got the order. We've already had some introductions of Dr. Peter Perret. He is Professor Emeritus at Stanford University, and I wanted to point out that he is also the recipient of the Federal Republic of Germany's Cross Order of Merit. We're very honored to have you here today. And last but hardly least is Dr. Jeannie Kiesling. She is the first civilian to attain the rank of full professor of history at the United States Military Academy. So as you can hear, we have a very high concentration of intellectual power here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Dr. Mahan.